Today's presentation is done in partnership with the Entrepreneurship Speaker Series sponsored by Axomo, and we are very grateful for this collaboration. I would also like to thank the Eccles Foundation for their generous and continuous support of this series, Tyler Stillman and his team, and the Provost's office for making this event possible. I would like to remind you that today's conversation will continue this afternoon at 3 p.m. on Thunder 91.1 and on the A.P.E.X Radio Hour podcast. Ed Latimore is a former professional heavyweight boxer, national amateur boxing champion, competitive chess player, and best-selling author. He holds a BA in physics from Duquesne University and is a veteran of the United States Army. Ed's writing focuses on self-development, realizing your potential, and sobriety, all of which he approaches from his personal experience overcoming poverty and addiction. And if you want to learn more, you can check out his blog at edlatimore.com, and I can attest that he knows what he's talking about after our sparring session this morning. He held up pretty well. It's now my pleasure to welcome Ed Latimore to Southern Utah University and to the A.P.E.X stage.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good, yeah, I'm loud. I can hear myself. That's good. Okay, so the title of the talk today is Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business. For those of you who don't know, boxing is typically referred to as the hurt business because every interaction in the sport, whether it is a knockout punch or one that is just deflected on the gloves or rolled with, it all hurts. It's just a matter of, does it disrupt your nervous system and put you down, or can you push through that pain? So we call it the hurt business because we're in the business of dishing out hurt. And boxing taught me so much. But today I'm going to distill a lot of those lessons down into 3 areas about risk, relationships, and confronting reality. This is George Box. George Box was a British statistician, made a lot of progress in Bayesian statistics. Anyone is familiar with that, where we're looking at how we update our predictions about the future based on new information that comes in. It sounds simple, but it has profound implications. But one of his favorite quotes of mine is that all models are essentially approximations. All models are approximations. Essentially, all models are wrong, but some are useful. However, the approximate nature of the model must always be borne in mind. And I start to talk off with that quote because boxing isn't a perfect model for life, but it's really good. And I've got 2 other models that I really enjoy to throw in there, but I think boxing is the best one. The first one is chess. And I love chess. I spend a lot of time playing chess. Chess it's a great way for you to get used to predicting how events are going to happen, for you to see 2, 3 moves ahead in life. And what you're really doing is considering how your action is going to affect the next action in return and how you'll set things up. And I always say, to a great strategist, the future should never be a surprise, and to a great tactician, the present should never be an obstacle. And a lot of people mix strategy and tactics up, but generally what we're trying to do with a strategic mindset is look at the overall picture and then tactically figure out what our big picture goal is and come up with ways to achieve that despite the current obstacles or challenges we face. And I love that, but it falls short because chess is technically not a game. I found this out, it blew my mind. So for an event to be a game, there has to be an element of uncertainty, a random thing that shows up that you can't predict, and then you have to deal with it and you have to work with it. And chess, computers today, there's always a right answer. You may not see it because you're a human and you have limited cognitive capacity, but the computer does, and it doesn't get tired, it doesn't make mistakes, and it has no emotional bias, it feels no fear. All of these things that affect our ability to make sound decisions, the computer doesn't have that. So chess is incomplete in that way, because while life is about seeing the future and is about planning, about making decisions that are going to impact your ability to achieve your goals, it falls short because it doesn't really have the uncertainty element. So that brings me to the next model before we get to boxing, and that's poker. Your greatest payoffs come from trusting your gut and intuition, especially when it goes against popular opinion and established protocol. I'm assuming everyone here is that you guys are all stand-up citizens and you never do something like spend thousands of dollars gambling money on sports, right? But anyone who is that type of person knows exactly what I'm talking about. You can only win, and win, I mean like really win big and really win long, is if you're correct when most people think something is going to go one way. When you have one idea about the outcome, everyone else has a different idea, and you bet against them. And the more unlikely your outcome is, the bigger an underdog you are, and the more you'll make. And poker has this additional aspect too, is that, you know, the more sure the opponent is that you don't have the big hand and that you're bluffing, the more they're going to try and punish you by betting big, keeping you in. But if you do have it, if you play the hand well, you come out ahead, you win. Poker is great in this way. And one of our favorite analogies that we use when we talk about life is that, you know, life is like poker. It doesn't matter, you know, what hand you're dealt, it's how you play the hand that determines if you're going to be a winner or a loser. And that works. But my problem with the poker analogy is if, you occasionally get a string of bad cards. You just keep getting them, keep getting them. And the blinds are going to eat you away. The rake is going to eat you away. Before you know it, you may not be in the game long enough to really benefit from the good luck that you'll eventually get over time. So that's where this falls short. It's a little too random and doesn't have the greatest element of control for you. Boxing, to me, is the perfect blend of those two. And my favorite part about fighting is this negative feedback mechanism. Whenever you make a mistake, you're punished for it. You're less likely to make that mistake again. And if you make it a third time, you won't be around at all to really make it. You don't know what your opponent is bringing into the ring. I mean, you have an idea, you do the most studying you can, and you prepare as great as you can to eliminate the role of chance, but things happen that you can't prepare for. And perhaps my favorite part about the boxing analogy, Rocky and Rocky Balboa, he says it best. His son, it's the new one, not the old one. I mean, they're all great, but the new one, where his son is trying to talk him out of taking this fight again, and he gives this speech. He says, life ain't about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving. That's how winning is done. And that's why I love boxing, because that's what really life is about. No matter how well you prepare, things are going to happen to you. That's just part of living in this universe. Things are going to happen. Some of those things are going to be bad, and you're going to have to continue going. So let's start with reality check number one. This is me. I would have been 19 or 20, and I'm living in this apartment. And barely, you can't really see it in the back, but that's my room. And there's no door. We just converted this big old hallway because we were three broke guys, and rent was $5.50, and it worked out. But during this time, I ended up in this situation because, and I'm happy here. I hope I look a little happy. I ended up in a situation. I had dropped out of college the first time I tried to go. And when I say I dropped out, it was more like I was on academic probation and they were about to kick me out. So you know how you come to work and they're like, you're fired, and I'm like, nah, you can't fire me, I quit. It was that kind of deal. I decided to get out of there. And I was floating around. I worked at a GameStop selling games. I don't even know if they still have GameStop. And just barely making ends meet. But I had developed this disdain for the university culture. and college and all things considered. And a lot of it was sour grapes. Now, some of it was real, but and I hold those thoughts today, but no one can say anything to me now that I have a degree in physics. It just doesn't hold weight. But at this point, I would talk to anybody who would listen about how college was pointless. And one of those people who happened to listen to me go off on these rants where I would talk about how there are all these successful people who have made their way in the world without a college degree was the mother of the girl I was dating at the time, who happened to be a professor of biology at the University of Pittsburgh. And you can imagine how well that conversation goes over, me ranting about the uselessness of college to a college professor. So one day, she loses it. And she says to me, she says, all right, Ed, let's pretend you're right and college is useless. Why don't you tell me what you've done with your life instead for the past 4 years instead of show up and eat my food every day? And then she kicked me out. And I went home and I shed a little bit of a tear. She was right, though. I was a bit of a loser. And wasn't really doing anything. I was living on the food and working at Starbucks, I think, at the time. So I said, okay, I got to put some sweat equity in on this planet. What am I going to do? So I looked at everything that was available to me. And college wasn't an option here at this point, and I'll cover that a little more later. But a big reason why, you got to pay money to go to college. I didn't have any money. I looked at the Army and I looked at boxing. Those were the two things that I looked at. That was my option. And I found boxing because this was back in 2008 when YouTube was just blowing up. And you could watch videos of people fighting. And I said, you know what? That's something I could do. But when I looked at the Army, I said, man, this is just back when we were starting to invade Iraq. And I said, I don't have that much love for the country, not like that. So I decided to walk into a boxing gym. And I go to a boxing gym and I stick with it. My rule for fighting was simple. I would not quit. If I got injured and I had to stop, okay. If someone who I come to trust eventually in the sport says, you know what, brother, this just ain't for you. You really like this, but it's just not, you're not making progress. All right, that'll work. But other than that, I'm going to keep going. And I stuck with it. And I kept fighting, and had a really good initial start. Some just knockouts. But they were knockouts. There was no skill. I was getting beat by guys that knew what they were doing. One guy in particular, a fighter named Fred Latham. He had been fighting his whole life. I only started at 22, ancient for being a boxer, to start this. He had been fighting since he was a kid. He was still an amateur, though. First time we fought, I was so uncoordinated and so just terrible that I actually swung and missed so wide and with so much force that I fell over. And normally when you fall, that's a fall, and they count it, and the ref rules it a slip, though, and I get up, and that was embarrassing. Between our first and second fight, I got with another coach. He fixed some fundamental issues that I had, namely I didn't know how to move my feet. They were terrible. Fixed those, and the second time we fought, it was a lot closer, but I lost. The third time we fought, though, in between the second and third, I said, okay, something's not working here. I'm not getting better. I'm not learning from the environment I'm in. What can I do? So I found the coach of great fighters in our area, lucky that he happened to be there, Tom Yankello, and he happened to live and train at the same place at this time, about 30 miles up the highway. Short drive, right? Well, here's the problem. So this is not the actual car. Couldn't find any pictures of that. I was too embarrassed, but this was the same model. The 91 Chevy Cavalier. And I'm assuming this one in the picture does not have the problems that mine had. For starters, there was me, the driver. That was the problem. I had a suspended driver's license. If I got caught driving with it, I was going to jail and straight to jail. I wasn't passing, going, collecting $200. They were sending me straight to prison. Second issue, this car was $450 when I bought it. Now, I don't know if you've ever purchased a $450 car or driven in one, but you get exactly what you pay for, which is mostly nothing. The brakes didn't work. The shock and suspension didn't work. The horn, I don't know where the horn went. It just wasn't there. Seat belts barely worked. The electrical system would occasionally just fail when it didn't affect the motor, and that was cool. But I remember one day I was driving in the middle of this snowstorm, and boom, click, it just went out. And I had no heat and no AC. And let me tell you, if you have to ever choose between heat and air conditioning, go with heat, because you can just take your shirt off and roll the windows down in the summer. In the winter, man, my gear sometimes would freeze, and that was a whole different problem. But I knew going to that gym was going to make me better. So I took the risk. I drove this car. I drove this very dangerous car. I fixed up some of the things so I wasn't like putting people's life totally at risk. But if I got pulled over because I didn't have a driver's license and that car was not passing inspection, I don't know if they have inspection in this state, but in Pennsylvania, you have to pass inspection yearly, and then you get a little sticker on your license plate that says your car is good to go, and you need that for insurance as well. Couldn't get any of that. So I'm driving about as illegally as you can, and I got really good at driving down the highway looking back 2 or 3 cars behind me to see if there were any cops, and if there were, I knew where a place to pull over so it didn't look suspicious that I did suddenly. Did all this. And I carried this on for about 5 months while I'm working and training with Tom. And it ends up paying off, because the 3rd time we fought, I knocked this kid out. And went through him like he wasn't there almost. And because of that victory, I ended up going on to the National Golden Gloves after I won the state. And in the National Golden Glove, I drew Dominic Brazil, who ends up going on to represent us in the 2012 Olympics in London. And I beat him. And when I beat him, he was represented by this group, and they bring me out to California. And now I'm a sponsored fighter. I get to focus all of my energy on fighting, and it makes me a better fighter, and it has a great setup for my future as a boxer. This is what the newspaper wrote when this finally happened, that I beat this guy. And, now they say some things. I don't know if that's always true, if it's true, but, you got to sell papers. But from this, I go on to win the National Police Athletic League. That's what POW stands for, championship, in 2011 after that. And then I get signed when I turn professional, because when you turn professional, boxing is it's a crazy business that is another speech all in of itself. But the thing you have to appreciate is that you can't really do anything if you don't get signed with a right and proper promoter. And Rock Nation, the same Rock Nation that was headed by, or is still, I believe, headed by Jay-Z, they picked me up and signed me. So this sets my career in motion, and it's fantastic. And it all started because it is one risk I took. Oh, it was technically multiple risks, but driving the car, I consider that one risk to get up there to become a better fighter. And that taught me really about the value of betting on yourself. You have to take, when you bet on yourself, that's the only time you'll ever be able to put the odds in your favor. Every other game that you play where there's any type of gambling or uncertainty involved, the house typically has an edge. They don't need you to always lose. They just need you to continue to play, because over time, their edge ends up taking more than, even if it's a small amount, 1 or 2%, it's just enough for them to really profit from you losing. So when you bet on yourself, when you take certain risks like this, it's the only time you're ever going to have the house in your favor, because you control the actions that are going to be taken. You set the rules, you set the pace, you set the tempo for everything that's going to go into what's going to determine the outcome. And just because I went to train with Tom and I took this treacherous drive, it doesn't mean the outcome is guaranteed. I could have lost that fight. I could have also not been, because the way a draw works at the national tournament, they just match everyone up, and then you pull a name out of a hat, and that's who you're paired up with. So I always think about this time in my life with that old quote, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. I did all the preparation, but the opportunity, I could have drew anybody else from the country, and I drew this guy from Cali, and his backing and all of that brings great awareness, and it sets off so many things to make the rest of my life go pretty cool. Well, that is until around 2016, September 23rd, 2016 to be exact. But Next thing boxing teaches me is about relationships. Now this is Trey Lipping Morrison. Anybody who is a fan of the sport, I have no idea if anyone is or not. His father was WBA champ Tommy Morrison, and they matched us to fight on Showtime. It was both of our debuts on the big level. I felt pretty good about going into it. I made it this far. And let me tell you, yeah, that's right, one round. And you know what's funny, when you get hit hard enough to have your nervous system disrupted, it doesn't really hurt. I actually thought I slipped the first time I got hit. And I got up, and then, now the second time I knew I didn't slip. I was jacked up. It took me a few months to watch the fight that I lost. Because it's kind of like, it's like if you break up with somebody. You don't know how long it takes you to look at old pictures and be all right. It was like that. I couldn't look at any of this stuff related, but when I finally did, it was cathartic. But when this happened, a few other things happened. The first thing that happened is the Rock Nation got rid of me. They dropped me like a bad habit. And here's how ruthless boxing is. This is one loss. I'm a former national champion. One loss. The fight was on a Friday in Oklahoma. I'm gonna get home the next day on a flight from Oklahoma to Pittsburgh, where I'm from, and there's already an express mail slip letting me know that they were getting rid of me. And I was like, wow, man, that's cold. They're like, you made sure it was overnighted. But when they got rid of me, that also cut my source of funding. At this point in my life, I had already started going back to school. It was like, I think I had about 100 credits in, and I said, I'm going to take that year off, or that semester, the fall semester of 2016. I'm going to take that off, focus on boxing. Look what good it did me. But took that semester off to focus on boxing. So I didn't have any prospects for employment when I decided I would go back. I'd missed the window for internship application, and a few people wanted to hire me, but they wanted to hire me full time. They were like, oh, you got all this experience with stuff, well, just come on in. And I really wanted to finish my degree. And on the other end were people who were like, we can give you some part-time work at like $11 an hour. This one place, it was a hotel. They were like, yeah, we'd love to have you here. We just need you to work at night and still go to school and work the books, and it wasn't happening. But I had a little bit of a trump card that ended up solving this problem. But before I cover that, we got to go back in time just a little bit. I wrote this article on my website, How to Get Better at Math. And when I wrote this article, I went through the trouble of ordering my high school transcripts to make a point. I wanted to prove to the people reading it that I wasn't just some savant kid who was trying to sell you on something. I wanted people to see that I actually put the work and energy into getting better at math. So I put in my transcript. And I'll tell you, when I was looking at this, I was like, wow, it doesn't even look like I graduated high school. And it turns out I didn't. They let me walk, but definitely did not graduate. But as you can see, I highlighted the math grades. Geometry, 9th grade, that's the only thing I get is a B. Everything else is C, D, D, C, D, C, D. It really, really messed with me. I was really afflicted with this fixed mindset. I didn't think I could get better at math because I wasn't a math person. I believed in that math gene myth that so many Americans are afflicted with. They think, I can't do it. It just wasn't born that way. But one of the things that really changed my mind about this was boxing. When I first started fighting, I was unbelievably bad. I just was a big kid, and I swung my fist really quick, and every now and then they'd get to the target before the other guy knew it, and that was it. There was no setup, there was no sweet science involved. But because I spent so much time practicing and I wanted to get good at it, I got better and I got better and I got better. And eventually I go on to get the national championship and win the local is a bit of an understatement, the state Golden Gloves. And I said to myself when I was going to go back to school, I said, well, if you did this with your body, if you improved your physical capabilities from this clumsy novice to this skillful fighter, why can't you do the same thing up here? Why can't you do it with your mind? That's not even 6 years ago. That's just as early as I could find the picture. Facebook was giving me some problems when I tried to dig through my memories. But I actually ordered these problems. 3,000 problems in calculus, 3,000 problems in physics. And that's just the surface, because before I could even get to calculus, I had to go back and look at where I had failed before, because calculus was that wall. I actually took calculus 3 times. On the 4th time, I got it. And when I say got it, I was like, wow, you mean I'm just multiplying and dividing, changing quantities? That's it? And then everything else was illuminated. But before then, I had to look and see, when did I have the problem with math? And I ended up going all the way back to basic arithmetic, basic stuff with fractions. And thank goodness the internet, you can just go under tons of papers to download, quizzes to take, videos, tutorials. Point is, I did all of this and just kept building my math habit up. Till I got better, till I got strong enough to try calculus again, and through calculus physics. And I was like, wow, I'm really getting it. Now, this is from, on the right, every physics major in the country takes something called the Major Fields Exam. It's our standardized test to see how much did you really learn. And I took that test and ended up being the highest score that year, 3rd highest overall, and better than, she didn't say it here in the email, but better than 63% of the country's physics graduates. And physicists are nerds, man. These are just smart people. And we did a lot better. And all this came on the heels of going back and building up on these foundations, okay? So now that we have this laid out, let's go back. I get cut from Rock Nation. I don't know what I'm gonna do for money, because that is running out real quick. And my coach asked me one day, he says, what are you doing for money now? I said, man, I found this website, varsitytutors.com. And I go and I tutor occasionally, but man, that stuff is sparse and it's intermittent and it's not really reliable. And he goes, let me talk to my wife. And his wife is a guidance counselor at a high school in a fairly affluent neighborhood. This is key. She comes back in 3 or 4 days and she says, okay. We can use him as a tutor, but we really don't need any more people to do English or history. And I'm like, the only thing I can do are not those things, like math and physics. This is like a great match. So I hop on. My first client, they call me and they interview me and they're like, okay. You know how when you're going through the process, you don't really know how they're perceiving you, but you're just going along with it. And I get a call back from Tina, my coach's wife, and she says, all right, they're really excited to hear that you're going to work with their daughter, but they're a little worried about your fee. Are you going to be any good at $35 an hour? And I'm like, I should have charged more. Wow, didn't know that, but it went on to be one of the most transformative experiences in my life, and it kicked off with the relationships that I had made with my coach and his family. And I had so much fun at it. I kept these. I have a few more, but I added these too. If you had told me a failing student in all math disciplines in high school, if you had said, yeah, man, in a few years you're going to be helping people get ready for the AP Physics exam and the AP Calc exam, I would have laughed at you. But this is exactly what started to happen in my life. And it all started because I believed in going back to the foundations, building things up. And this started with boxing. And boxing set up the relationship that I had to be able to get this job. Because once you do tutoring good with one student, then the rest of them, it spread like wildfire. I had to turn down business, but it was good. It felt good, right? Do good stuff. Now, the last look at reality. I think I'm 24 in this picture, 24, 25, but I am drunk. And there are, when I was putting together this presentation, I said, how heavy should I go on these photos? I got a lot of them, man, because the internet is forever. That's one thing you guys got to worry about now, any students. The internet is forever. I had a very toxic relationship with alcohol. And it's one of those things. So whenever you talk to an addict, addicts are fantastic at rationalizing things. Addict logic is actually incredible. I used to say, for example, whenever somebody would bring up issues with my drinking, I would say, but you gotta understand something, man. 95% of my problems in my life were caused or exacerbated by alcohol. And I was saying that to explain why I didn't need to stop drinking, because the only problems I had was, when I was drinking. I used to say, if you don't like me when I'm drunk, you probably wouldn't like me when I was sober. Because in my mind, I'm the same person. And then something happened that made me take a hard look in the mirror. I was working at T-Mobile. I was selling cell phones for $9.28 an hour plus commission. And I got this job after I left the program in California. And so this was a good job, but it paid so little and I had so little money in my bank account and no other way to earn, that a good friend of mine, the only reason why I survived this period in my life, a good friend of mine, he lets me stay in a room in his house for $200 a month. And I was like, wow, that's great, man. Like, real solid. Now, I always had money to drink, though. It's amazing how that works. You can find money for your vices. And then one night, I'm supposed to get off work and go party with some people drinking. And if you've ever worked in retail, this is gonna sound familiar. We close at 9 o'clock. Somebody comes into the store at 8:58. Now, if they had come in at 9:01, I could tell them, get. Since they came in at 8:51, 8:58, couldn't do that. Not only could I not do that, I couldn't even suggest it, otherwise I'd lose my job. So I had to treat this customer like they were a regular customer. So at first I'm like hiding off in the corner, hoping they just, that they stumbled in here on accident. And then when it became clear that it was not an accident, I engaged them and I said, well, I may as well make a commission out of this, right? So we went through, person was in the market for a new phone. New phones pay the best commission. Sounds good so far. We're going around, we're talking, showing all the models. I don't realize the time now, it's almost 10 o'clock. It's like 9:35, 9:40. By the time they say to me, okay, this is great. I think I'm gonna come back in tomorrow and I'm gonna take care of this. And that meant I wasn't gonna get the commission. And I remember being so mad that I messed up closing out the store, which added another hour. So I didn't get out there until almost 11 o'clock. And I remember sitting in my car going, this is ridiculous. You're better than this. Now, it's one thing to say it. I think everybody thinks that they can be more and do more, and they believe that. And you got to take action to do something about it. So as I'm sitting here saying this, I go, yeah, I can be better, but why am I not there yet? And I kept thinking about that for the next few days. And then one day it hit me while I was falling asleep with a can of beer. I was like, yo, you are a loser. Your life is not even close to what you think it should be. It's all a facade. When you're doing well at something, you can hide, like people will ignore so many other deficiencies. And even now when I look back, I'm like, no one said anything to me. No one, at all. But it's because I'm fighting, and I'm winning fights. And so they go, well, he's winning fights. What are you going to say to him? I'm like, you can say something. But the fact that I was able to look at myself and go, all right, this is not where I want to be. I'm a loser. And that's a hard thing for a man to do, to look in the mirror and break his own ego just like that. At that point, I was like, all right, what are we going to do here? And I got the idea. We come full circle back. I said, well, the Army is going to pay for me to go to school. Let's go do the Army. So I enlisted to go do the National Guard. And then that set me up and put me on the path to really see what I wanted to do in my life. I wasn't sure if it was going to be physics. I actually planned it to be math. I said, I'm going to go back and do math because math would give me the most flexibility. And I also would not have to worry about like missing a lab science or something. I could just, because I figured I'd have to work. And then when I get through basic training, you go to 6 more weeks, well, 22 weeks in my case, actually. 22 weeks of something called AIT training, Advanced Individual Training, where they train you on your MOS or your military occupational specialty. The Army is full of these acronyms. And for the first 6 weeks, you go through something called BMAT, Basic Mechanical and Electronic Theory. And as I'm going through that, I said, this is much closer to what I want to do. This just feels really cool. And the path to do that was electrical engineering, which meant I would have to engage in lab science. And I said, all right, that's where we're at now. I started taking the classes to become an electrical engineer, and that means the initial prerequisites of chemistry, physics, calculus, all this level 1, level 2. And physics level 1, we do an experiment on projectile motion. And projectile motion is whenever you launch a particle with only the initial velocity and the angle that it's launched from and gravity. Gravity is the only other force acting on it. The equations are really simple. But they're just equations. They're models. They're not going to always be accurate. They get you in the ballpark. So I crunched the numbers on my experiment that day, and I put down a tape where this pellet is supposed to land based on this math. And don't you know, it landed exactly where that tape was. And I said, man, that is magic. That's what I actually want to study. I want to study physics instead. And this all gets started because I decided to take one piece of reality, one person's feedback on my life. And you know, granted, when I tell this, because now today, Dr. Roberts is a great friend of mine. And I tell her all the time, every time I'm on a podcast or a show, and I tell that story, I message her and I give her credit for steering me, like being the first person to really give me a place to go, like some real direction, some feedback. That second block, Sober Letters to My Drunken Self, I wrote that because when I got sober, sobriety date, December 23rd, 2013. When I got sober, you know, everyone warned me that my friend circle would change. And it didn't really, you know, the friends I had before drinking, like through high school, those actually became closer friends. A few people fell off, a few people, the relationship intensified. All in all, it was pretty much a wash, right? But one thing no one warned me about was how my perspective of myself and my world and how I related would change. It was a big change. So I wrote that and released it, self-published. By the way, if you ever self-published a book, it's great in speed, man, but goodness, is it a lot of other stuff that you give up in terms of speed. But it's helped so many people, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of because it's how I've been able to give back and continue to reap the rewards of what started with boxing, because I guarantee you, I list 4 reasons whenever I talk about why I got sober. I was in the Army, there's my boxing career, there is my relationship that I had just started, and then there was just, so man, this is my my reputation that I have for myself. How am I going to be able to look at myself in the mirror? It's really important that you whenever you do things, whenever you make it, however you make it, you have to make sure that there is some way that you give back. It's not always money. It's not always money, and it's not always time. Ultimately, it is some secondary configuration of those two, but any way that you can be the person for somebody, be the person that you needed when you were at a position of acquiring growth, it's fantastic. That picture, I really didn't want to go to my graduation. I swear, I just, because I graduated when I was 23. I was like, 33, big difference. Graduated when I was 33, and I was like, man, I don't really want to go and do this. But I went because my wife was like, no. I dealt with all this nonsense while you were going through all this, and we're going to go now so I can celebrate. I'm like, whatever, right? But in all seriousness, I love that picture, because to me it wasn't just about going back to school. It was about everything that happened while in the process of returning to school, and this just was a cap off of it. It all started again. It really, I really, people think I give boxing too much credit. I don't think I give it enough, to be honest with you, because that might seem completely unrelated, finishing school because of boxing. But boxing does not care. Boxing does not care about your talent. Like, it's nice, whatever, but really the amount of hard work you do and the courage you develop as you face things, that is the big one. And I just threw this last picture, and this was cool. That's Roy Jones Jr. when he was getting ready for his fight with Mike Tyson. And I was a sparring partner. It was a good time. Even at 50, he broke my nose, and it was enjoyable. So what I want to leave you with, yeah, that's something you'll never hear. What I want to leave you with, though, in conclusion on everything, is that when you find something really difficult, all right, because could I have fixed my life, accomplished these things without boxing? Sure. I always say, joining, boxing to do what I did is like joining the Marines to learn how to fold your sheets. Like you're gonna learn how to fold your sheets, but you're probably gonna get a lot of other stuff you weren't really bargaining for. But that's part of the point. The hard things, the hard lessons that you get through the life of improvement, of pushing through a goal with this an obstacle that really provides resistance, that really fights back, pushes back, is invaluable. My transition to working and doing a lot of things online, I pull so many, I really pull from what the confidence that I developed in fighting to help me push, when the days are hard and uncertain in internet business, because it is absolutely, what's the trade-off, right? You get to work carry your own hours, right? But you also don't know, is the next day going to be like the day before? Is it going to be worse? Is it going to be better? That's the trade-off, right? But in conclusion, the hard lessons from the hurt business, I think anyone can use, and you don't have to get in a ring to learn them. Just, pull up this presentation and think of me whenever you're going through something troubling and you have to get through it regardless. Thank you.